All right. Hi, how are you, Miss Anna?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, great. So I am extremely excited to interview you today. I've heard some great things so far based off of your resume that you submitted to be a teacher at our on our campus. I'm interested to hear from you and some great feedback. But just a little bit before I begin to ask you questions, I just want you to know, our campus is well known for how we treat our teachers and our students, and we build relationships with them. And so I'm looking for a person who's going to be very much so able to fit into the family of ours on our campus. So I'm excited. And I just want to know a little bit more about you, and then we'll just make this pretty much like just a conversation because I'm interested. I know that some, people kind of get nervous. I don't want you to be nervous for this interview or anything. Um, but let's see here. So quick question, I guess. Well, why did
Mhm.
you decide to become a teacher?
I just, I guess the reason I mainly started was because I wanted to serve my community. Not only do I love working with kids, but I always wanted to give back to the community where I grew up in.
Mm.
So I first started as a substitute teacher just on my spare time while I was trying to figure out what I want to do with my life. And then I just really realized how much I loved working with kids. And I was working in schools that were in my community where I went to school and where I grew up. And since it's a lower socioeconomic community, I realized there was a very high need for not just, I guess, leadership for kids. And I just wanted to be part of that. And I also just loved being in the classroom.
That's awesome. And how long have you been teaching?
7 years.
7 years. Okay. 7 years in what grade
Uh,
levels?
so I worked in elementary for 5 years. And right now I'm doing my second year in middle school.
Okay.
So once I was in elementary, I was teaching English language arts and like reading and writing. And now that I am in middle school, I am teaching history and social studies.
Okay. How did you find the transition between your elementary years and then going into secondary? How was that for you?
Honestly, since when I did my transition, it was right in the middle of COVID. It was quite difficult. Um, I had to adjust a lot of things. It wasn't just what I was teaching and the grade, but it was the way I was teaching. So during COVID, obviously, we were teaching online, and then after that, it transitioned to both online and in person. So it was very difficult for me to get accustomed to it.
Mhm.
Not just the part about the subject I was teaching and the age range, but also the environment that I was teaching it because of COVID. So it was quite difficult. Yeah.
Mm.
Hmm.
I think I hear you're saying like COVID. So, I mean, obviously that's brought about a lot of change in the education system in today. And I know our teachers here on campus, that it was probably the hardest year of everyone's lives. So even if they were not a first year teacher, they pretty much felt like a first year teacher.
Hmm.
With that being said, how did you, because I know that's a major transition,
Hmm.
putting COVID on top of that as well. How do you handle issues as far as discipline in the classroom? Like, what does that look like for you? And I know that now, things
Hmm.
with COVID have changed. Like we're doing this online, and I know that everything was or virtual, and a lot was virtual. But how do you handle those students who may not feel motivated in the classroom and maybe cause a little bit of issues?
Right. So, I mean, it has been a little bit difficult to handle since we weren't used to handling, for example, teaching online. But I think the biggest biggest thing is consistency. As long as you are consistent, whether it be in person or online, kids need consistency. If you're telling them you need to do this or that, whether it be in person or online, as long as you're consistent in telling them what they're doing, I think that's all that matters. And you need to follow through with your actions. So with your words, with actions.
Mm-hmm. I think that's big right there, what you're saying. I feel many teachers, they say, oh, this is what I'm going to do, or I'm going to call home. I'm going to call home. I think I walk through with teachers all the time, and, they say, I'm going to try to call home. I'm going to try to call home. And I know that teachers are busy and sometimes things fall by the wayside. Here on our campus, we do have a program called School Status. And so most teachers just download that as an app on their phone to stay in contact with parents. What are ways, or how do you, because you say follow through, how do you stay connected with those families? Do you get connected? What does that look like for you in your classroom?
Well, yes, it's not just calling and texting them, but just emails. I like to also make sure that the parents are aware when the kids are failing. So even though we do send out progress reports every couple of weeks, I like to email parents updates about their kids. So thankfully we have on our Skyward, which is where we put our grades, there's an option where you can be emailing your parents, not just during the progress report, but before or after that, so that they're aware of their kids' progress. So I like to do that. Usually I try to do it every week, but obviously there's some weeks where there's just a lot happening. So maybe like every 2 weeks, I try to stay up on that. Yeah.
So,
and calling and texting. So we also have a way to text our parents too. So I try to send out announcements. We have a website where we can also have them stay in touch with us. So it has all your information on there. So they're able to contact us through either email or phone.
Okay. So I hear, you're keeping in contact with your parents, and that's awesome. That's what we want to see and hear, even before and after progress reports are there, because that's, they need more than just a piece of paper or online to tell them how their students are doing, or their kids. How do you develop more so of that positive relationship with your students? So what are you doing, in the classroom to cultivate that and create more so a sense of classroom community?
Right.
Do you have that going on? How do you do that?
I mean, I like to think that I do. I always start off the year just by trying to get to know the students, having them write about themselves. Especially this year, I started with just telling them, look, I'm going to share a lot about myself with you because I want to have a close relationship with you. So I'm going to talk about my life, what I've been through. So I do give them a lot of background information about myself. And then I also tell them, if you would like to share things with me, I have them write them down in a paper. And I've actually found that very helpful, because a lot of these kids are willing to try to share their lives with you. And they want you to know about themselves so you can better understand them. So I do that. And I also try to just take time, every time I'm working in small groups, just to tell the kids, ask them, how are you doing? What's your day been like? How's your life going? And even privately, just, talking to them in the hallway, how are you doing? Because sometimes kids need that. They need to know that you're there for them, not just in the classroom, but outside of the classroom. So I just try to have a very open door policy in my classroom where they can come to me with whatever issue, whether it be academic or personal.
That's awesome. Yes. And that's very, very important. I hear you, and you're talking, and it's very much so very fitting to what we believe on campus, and that's building those relationships with students, and it has to be embedded within our instruction, right?
Mhm.
So, segueing into instruction, and I hear you saying you work in small groups with students, and I know that's a thing that you're carrying over from elementary. So, are you still working in small groups in secondary? And what does that look like in your classroom? What does instruction look like for you?
So since I was used to doing that in elementary, I guess it was ingrained in me. So when I came to secondary, that was just something that I did. So even though it's not every day, um, usually I try to get the content across for, especially with history, there's so much content that you have to get across first. So I do have like lecture times, and then I have group work time. So half of the week might be devoted to just getting that out the information, and then the next half is just working in different stations. And I always like to head one station to be teacher led, because that's another way also that you get to know your students and you get to know their level, not just I guess what they know, but their learning level or their learning style.
Mm.
um, so I try to consistently do half of the week
Mhm.
group work, but obviously there's certain weeks that it doesn't allow it, especially lately with the testing. So but yeah, I try to carry as much group work as I can.
Hmm. Um, so as far as group work, so you're obviously doing forms of differentiated instruction.
Mhm.
What do the lessons look like for each group? Are they necessarily to a certain level? I know I hear, on your resume that you're teaching social studies. So
Mhm.
what does that look like? Is everyone getting the same information? How do you account for everyone's needs in the room?
For the most part is on a specific level, but I do have certain accommodations since I do have um sped students in my class. I also have somebody that comes in to help me with those specific classes where I have a lot of sped students. So I do have certain accommodations. So I also have lessons specifically targeted for my EL students. So I have certain readings that will be giving to certain groups. So I have like my higher level groups, and then I have my EL learners, and then I have my special learners. So I do have to find specific reading levels for different groups, but when it comes to like for example vocabulary, I do give different types of levels. For example, my higher level kids just get the regular vocabulary and they have to work on the station themselves. But then when it comes to my like SPED or EL learners, I do give specific examples of um, the words and pronunciations. They also have like text to speech accommodations. So yes, usually it varies depending on the group.
Okay. Wow, I would say that's what we call good teaching altogether. I mean, we have all kinds of students in our classrooms,
Mhm.
and we have to account for all of them. I know that in past, for secondary, it's been we teach to the level of the TEK, and that
Mhm.
is it. And we are up in front of the room, and it's not a mini lesson; it is a whole group instruction, and that's all they were going to get, and that's all they would receive. And so I do, I do value that in you, and so I saw that on your resume, and
Mhm.
some of the things that you were speaking of so
Mhm.
far, and that's awesome. Like that's something that we need here on our campus for sure to continue, because I'll be honest with you. We have a mixed group of people and how they feel about good instruction and how that looks and feels in their classroom, but research is showing that differentiated instruction is highly effective in the classroom, and it helps us to bridge the
Mhm.
gap for students. So I definitely appreciate that so far. I think that you're, pretty much going to be a good fit for our class. Have you ever incorporated any collaborative learning, collaborative more or project-based type of learning, especially by it being social studies or in the past? Have you ever done any projects like that?
Yes, I've tried to, especially towards the end of the year, but honestly, it's very hard to incorporate it sometimes when you have a specific guideline of things you need to teach. But usually, like after the STAR test, I do have more project learning, project-based learning, and they can choose what type of projects they want to do. It could be like a research, or it could be some type of video or web I think last year I did like a web series thing where they got to make their own series, like online history series.
Mhm.
Um,
That's
yeah.
awesome. And that's sparking the creativity in our students and allowing them some choice in the room as well.
Mhm.
Um,
Right.
with everything moving in your classroom, I can just imagine your classroom and have a feel for your small groups. I'm wondering how, in this everything going on, you have all this differentiated instruction happening, sometimes projects happening, and all of that. How do you track the data for your students? How is data being tracked? Are students, do you know where your students are currently at, and how does that look?
Yeah, so I do, thankfully we have like programs that can help with our assessment tracking, and I also have the kids keep a tracking sheet and a tracking in their student notebook, so they do get to know their own growth. Um, and our program at school tracks them by TEAC and by achievement also, so which is something that I like. That way it's easier to also group the students
Mhm.
a lot of the time, so you know specifically what they're lacking on or what they're being successful in. So we do have a specific program that does that for us, so that's an advantage. But um that makes it easier for us. And I am like a type of person who likes spreadsheets. So I every year I do make spreadsheets tracking every single student. Unfortunately for social studies, they don't have a seventh grade STAR test that I can track, but I do track every single assessment that they take, whether it be my own assessment or a district or campus assessment.
So you must be, and I'm segueing more into, we are a DDI school, a data-driven instruction,
Mhm.
and we're all about the backward planning,
Mhm.
and moving into our PLCs, our professional learning communities. Um, Knowing that, like, you're tracking students and understanding that they don't have a STAR test like from the previous year. Are you,
Mhm.
when you first come in, have you given a pre-assessment? What does that look like so that you have a baseline for your students?
Right. So we do give a pre-assessment, which is the STAR test, which kind of tells us, which most of the time, honestly, kids don't perform well in, because the information has not really been presented to them since fifth grade. So they've had 2 years without any, if at all, um, the information that we're going to be teaching them during our eighth grade US history. So yes, it helps in some ways because we know where they started, but at the same time, we're always starting from zero. Um, so it's kind of difficult. And it is like from my district at least, it's a mandated thing that we do have to do like a BOY assessment. And but most of the time it really does show growth because they haven't really been exposed to any of the material that they're being
Mhm.
during our class. In the other 2 previous years, in sixth grade, they do geography, seventh grade is Texas history. That doesn't really correlate to US history. So
Mhm.
most of the material is brand new and fresh to them. Mhm,
Mm.
mhm,
Yeah, that's a big, you have a tough one there, and that's awesome that you are able to adapt to what you've been given. I mean, they don't have an assessment beforehand, but you're taking what they can, and you're doing enough in the year and teaching to the TEKS and making sure that you have differentiated instruction for students to reach the goal. Now, as far as backward planning goes, so I hear that you do a BOI and you have those assessments, but what is that in between looking like, your day-to-day planning? How do you plan? What's that process look like?
So obviously, like you said, with data-driven instruction, you have to look at what's going to be assessed in the STAR test. So I always look, especially to the frequency distribution chart, where it tells me specifically what's going to be asked on the STAR test. So I always have to make sure that I include all the material that is being tested. Also, when it comes to all the TEKS, I have to, I really love looking at Lead Forward, because Lead Forward is it's just great material, and a very good resource, because it tells you specifically what to focus on, not just vocabulary and not just the frequency distribution of what is being tested, but it also tells you how to teach certain units of the curriculum. It tells you what are the misconceptions that most kids have. I really love looking at the data from previous years to see how the kids were confused by certain questions, not just how they were worded, maybe just not just the vocabulary, but what about that content that they found confusing. So I am one of those people that really, really looks at the data and likes to analyze it to make sure that what I'm teaching is aligned to it, but also that I'm targeting those misconceptions so that they're not going to be confused by them.
True. Okay. That's awesome. I mean, like it sounds like you are ready to hit the ground running and when you're coming into this position. So, I'm hearing all the great things, and I know, again, COVID has come upon us, right? And previously, I'll let you know, on our campus, we were not a one-to-one technology based campus. So all of our students did not have the technology. We had our computer labs, and so our students would go to the computer labs every now and then. And then most teachers had their computers in the classroom. In probably about 3 or 4. So if students or teachers were giving stations or small group learning, or if they just sent students there, they would have about 4 students on at a time. I would assume that you have lots of technology happening ever since COVID, but what does that look like? We are moving toward more of a blended learning campus. And so I'm just curious as to what does that look like? Are students just on a random program? How do you incorporate technology in your classroom?
So yes, we're also doing kind of like a blended learning style of teaching this year. So it is a one-to-one technology. Everybody has their Chromebooks and they're all on them, and they do use them every single day. There's not really a specific program that they're using, but we do have our Google Classroom that we're using daily for every single class. We are posting all our work there. So like you said, with COVID, I still have certain students that are out, sometimes a week or 2, sometimes even more at a time. So you have to have that technology component available to them for every single lesson. So yes, even though I have things in my lessons that have nothing to do with technology, it's still incorporated, and I still have to make it available to them. So all my lessons are Google Slides that are available to them to read. All my assignments, even though they might be on a paper worksheet in class, I have to make it available to them on a Google document or somehow online for them to complete. So it is very much a blended learning. I have a lot of videos. I have recorded my lecture, where they can watch it online. I don't do it for every lesson, but as much much as I can do that for them, I try to make it available for them to watch, because it's also great for them to just get like to see the teacher and specifically what they're saying within their lesson and within their lecture, and seeing the material and have it explained to them instead of having to read it. Because as we know, some kids, even in middle school, still have difficulty understanding and reading instructions. So if it's oral and, you're saying it to them out loud, it's easier for them to understand and to access.
Okay. Awesome. Excellent. Yes. Um, so, I mean, I'm just going to give at this time just a couple scenarios, just to, kind of gauge your response and how you would go about handling these situations. I'm going to go ahead and start with the one that you kind of brought up. You have a student in your room. Okay. This student probably just moved to the United States within the last 2 years. And they're sitting in your classroom and they have a vague idea of like they can comprehend what you're saying a bit, but they're not producing English. They're not able to speak English. And many of the students around are translating. What do you do with that student?
Okay.
Handle
Oh,
that.
usually that is a very difficult situation to be in, but I guess you have to be prepared for anything. So I do like to provide a lot of visuals for my class. That way, and it's not just the kids who are brand new to the country and don't speak the language. It could be just them not being exposed to certain vocabulary. So it's not just those, but a lot of different types of students. I'd like to have a lot of visuals, videos, or even using gestures, like hand gestures, to show your body language, I guess, to try to help them figure out what you're talking about and to understand. That's very good. And like I said earlier, also having like something text to speech or like something that you can use to translate to them, having dictionaries available to them in their language. I am bilingual, so I know how to interact in English and Spanish, but if it came to other languages, I think it's very helpful that you have visuals all the time. And like I said, even certain gestures help identify what you're saying by body language.
That's awesome. I mean, we are a high EL population here on this campus. And so that's why I asked those questions. Our teachers must know. So I take it that you are ESL certified?
I am bilingual certified.
Okay, so bilingual. Okay. So that's a huge asset to us because our students need that those accommodations. Because if not, they'll just float by, and we don't want our students to float by. We really want them to get their instruction as well, along with the rest of their peers. And so excellent. I'm going to give you another scenario, and in this one, it's the scenarios I'm giving are real of what we see on our campus. So there's a student that comes to you, and the student says, "Miss, I heard a student call another student a name, and there's a situation that there's been some bullying going on." And this student happens to actually be the one being bullied. So she's not really coming to you and saying it aloud, but she's coming to you and saying, asking for a friend type of situation. Right. How do you handle this situation when a student's being bullied in your classroom?
Right. Well, first off, I would ask them, okay, is who it is you're talking about, and if they do have the, I guess, confidence to tell me that it was them, I would hope that I would have cultivated a relationship with them to trust me. But if not, I would tell them, I'm glad you're telling somebody, number one, because that's the first step. You have to tell a teacher, a grown up, a parent, whoever, what is happening. Number two, I have to figure out how it's being done, where it's being done, like on campus, off campus, online. Obviously, we'd have to figure out who the other student is. I guess just you have to cover your bases first. Make sure that it's happening, when and where. And then after that, you have to make sure that you're also telling the parents, because the parents have to be aware of the situation that's going on. And most of the time, if it's very harsh bullying going on, I do like to get either a counselor or an administrator available, because that it takes a toll on students differently. So you have to address the problem head on. Okay, why is this happening? Who is doing it? And what are we going to do to fix it? So you have to talk to each student and each parent, figure out why it's happening, how we're going to stop it, and how we're going to move forward with I guess what's the correct word to use? I guess how to remedy this, on how to make sure that we move from it, with each side of the party being I guess handling it.
Yeah, definitely. I like when you said covering your bases. That's extremely important. And I mean, we come to find out that the student, it ended up being that student. However, if it wasn't that student, now we're in hearsay, right? Because we're not
Right.
sure, what's going on. So the fact that you're saying cover your bases is very important. And I would also encourage to reach out. On our campus, we have awesome counselors. We actually have 3 counselors on campus this year. They are really involved in our students' lives, and they pretty much know our students on campus. Not everyone, but I would say reach out to them and make sure that they're aware as well, and they can start taking those students in and being sure that they are being counseled in the situation and being able to handle what's going on. And hopefully the behavior would stop. And from there, bullying is an offense that we don't take lightly. So, some, like, if, we got to the bottom of this and the administrator was involved, definitely some write-ups would more than likely occur, and a disciplinary consequence would happen as well. And these are situations that we deal with on our campus. Fortunately for us, we do not have high turnover rate with teachers due to huge behavior issues going on with students. For the most part, if we have respectful kids, and I'll tell you, years ago, when I started here at this campus, that was not the case. They're middle schoolers, they are finding themselves, and there's a whole lot going on. So I guess, the last scenario, because this was the case for us, and we never want to get so far ahead that we can't say that it may not happen. But how do you handle defiant students in the room? We do have very respectful students, and that's great when it's all great. But have you ever had a defiant student, someone, who is disrespectful toward you, or in any kind of way within the classroom? How do you handle those situations?
Luckily, I haven't really had to deal with a lot of that, but I think that's also thanks in part to my relationship to my students. I think building relationships is the most important part. And I'm not going to say they're all been perfect little angels, but there's been times where, some of them, try to say something back to me, but at that time you have to step in right away and either pull them out and saying, hey, what's wrong? What's up with you today? If there's something going on, you usually don't speak to me like that. Or Is there something that you like to talk about? And I think also pulling them to the side and talking to them privately helps a lot, because you're not putting them on the spot in front of everybody. I think that's one thing that's very important. But like I said, I feel like just you prevent that by building relationships with them from the get-go and being close to them. And obviously they're all going to have bad days or off days, but you have to deal with it right then and there before you let it get too far. And you have to set boundaries with them, and let them know this is not an acceptable behavior. Because I always tell my students, I treat you with respect, so I expect that back. There's never going to be a time where I don't respect you, so there should never be a time when you don't show the same respect towards me. But as I stated before, I think as long as you're building relationships with your students from the get-go, that's usually not a problem that you're going to have.
That's an excellent response to that. We find that many of our students who are defiant, it's usually not toward that teacher, specifically their behavior, what they're doing. They didn't wake up and say, I'm going to get on my teacher's nerves today. Probably wasn't in their mind. And so having that, understanding that our students have lots of trauma, and understanding that they have a lot going on in their home lives. I like what you said, building that relationship to understand that, I see this behavior in you, but I know that this behavior is not you. We're not going to attach the behavior to the student. However, I do believe that it is important to nip it in the bud, like you're saying, so that it's not an issue and becomes a bigger issue later.
Right. And especially with COVID now, every single student has been going through even more trauma and traumatic experiences that we know, because it has affected every single one of them in a different way. And especially with the years coming, I feel like that's going to be something that's going to be essential, just building relationships, because they're going to be coming with a lot of baggage and trauma that they've experienced, not just from, having the situation and environment change in school, but in their lives. There's going to be a lot of kids who have lost parents or grandparents or friends or loved ones. So I think that in the next coming years, it's going to be essential, like having some type of like social emotional learning in the classroom to help them deal with everything that's been brought by this pandemic.
Definitely. Definitely, like our students, they need us, right? And they need us as support system for them. And speaking of support system, and we've talked a lot about our students, but on the last note here, what is your relationship with your coworkers? Because I know we get caught up as teachers in our own classroom. Are you more of a team player when it comes to planning with them and working with them, or all togetherness, or are you alone? And what does that situation look like for you?
Yeah, definitely collaboration. I think that is the best way to work, is to work as a team, because as they say, two or more minds are better than one. And also I've learned that a lot of teachers have a lot of different ideas and a lot of different ways that they teach, and you learn from them every single day, whether it be an experienced teacher or a brand new teacher. You can learn something from either one of them. So that's the situation I'm in right now. I have a teacher who is extremely experienced. She's been teaching for about 20 years. And then in my team, there's also a teacher who is just fresh out of college. So, and I've learned something from both of them. So the three of us work great because we're all very open. As working as a team, we collaborate and we share resources, whatever we find or whatever we make, whether it be like lessons or any type of resources. We like to share, because we know that obviously every year teaching changes. So new teachers can bring something, whether it be like a technology aspect, and older teachers have the experience of the content and dealing with different situations. So collaboration, I think, is key, because you can always learn from somebody.
Definitely, definitely. And that's for us as teachers. I mean, we're constantly learning, we're constantly growing. And you're right, it changes every year. It changes with a group of students. It changes every class period because we have different students. So I am greatly appreciative of this conversation that we've had. I truly believe that you're an awesome fit for our campus. I want to hear more from you and want to get to know, if you're interested in any after school activities or anything like that. We have a lot going on campus. We have groups that you can start, and are you able to or want to start any clubs with our students, or do you want to do that? Like, how involved are you even after or before school type of activities?
No, yeah, I'm interested. I've always been interested in athletics. I myself used to play different sports in middle school and high school. So when I was teaching elementary, I was one of the soccer coaches for the girls team. So I would love to do that again. I've also done different clubs. I've done like reading clubs or reading competitions. I'd be involved. I mean, really in anything. I've always been involved in like tutorials and stuff, and even if it's not mandatory, so I would be open to that. But a lot of different activities, different clubs, when it comes to like, I used to also be part of an engineering girls club that I used to co-head with another teacher. So yeah, no, I love doing different activities and just, and especially like helping kids become better leaders.
That is awesome. We need you here on our campus. And so I hope that you got a good feel. I have a great feel from you. I feel like you can, again, jump right in and be a part of our family. That's what we do. We are involved in a whole lot of things, and we're really excited to start the school year and finish it off with motivating our students to do more than just what's in the classroom. So again, I thank you and I appreciate you so much. Do you have any questions for me? I know it was a lot of information, but any questions?
I guess I am used to having a campus where it's a very tight-knit community within just the teachers, but also with the community around us. So I just wanted to know what type of programs you guys have to like outreach to the community and parents.
Oh, yes. That's awesome. Like I said, we have tons of clubs, tons of organizations within our campus. I know one first comes to mind, Community in Schools. Miss Reyes does an awesome job at coordinating that for us. She comes in, she actually is pretty much the liaison between our campus and our community. Any supplies students may need, any counseling services they may need, even though now I'll talk about that in a moment. But she is that person. She's our go-to person. Like, that is why she's on our campus. She is constantly reaching out for food bank services, for services for social emotional learning for our students, any of those things that the kids need. She also helps with our homeless population as well. And so that, getting resources out to parents. And then, obviously, if anyone needs translations or anything of that sort, and that information needs to get to those parents or community members, she is that go-to person in that organization for Community in Schools. We also just received a clinic on campus. And so that clinic is here to stay, and it's actually open to our community. So the clinic it's located downstairs near our front office. And so anyone in the community can actually set up an appointment to use it. They set up for mainly mental health facility. So they are there for our community. All they would have to do is go onto the website to fill out their forms, or to fill out for the appointment. If they have insurance or if they don't have insurance, they have that information ready and available to them. And because it's hosted on our campus, all students also have access to that particular clinic. Usually they go through by, seeing our nurse or seeing our counselors, and then they could get referred to go into that clinic. So we have tons of things going on with our community. We even have a Queer Straight Alliance group on our campus, which is awesome, that I think is now going to be bridging some gaps here. And it's a startup, but I think that particular group is going to be able to reach not just the students, within our school, but I think they'll have some impact on the community as well. So that's up and coming. So, I mean, you can jump right in, get involved right away. And, we're open for our parents and, by way of, even on Saturdays we're there. So it's, and not to say teachers are working every Saturday, but it's an opportunity. But we are very open to our parents in our community.
That's good. I'm excited to.
Yes. I hope you make the decision to stay on our campus.
Yeah.
All righty. Well, thank you so much, Miss Anna. We appreciate you for getting on this Zoom call with us. And I cannot wait to hear back from you. And you're going to hear from me, I'm sorry, really soon. So thank you.
Thank you.